Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. This Thursday, CIG did an Inside Star Citizen where they did a demonstration of the prototype stage of the Salvage Munching system. I love it when they open up at such an early stage, warts and all, and there were some particularly huge warts in this prototype, because it means that I and others like me can weigh in with suggestions without feeling that we're already too late to actually make a difference with our suggestions. So my first observation is a question that they didn't answer, and that is, how is this substantively different than mining? Because this prototype didn't really feel that different than mining. Take the big blocks, shoot at them until they can become small blocks, hover up the small blocks for stuff to refine. Now, I'm hoping that they already have an answer to this, but they just didn't express it, and it wasn't evident. Because honestly, it is hard to get excited about munching without an answer about how it is different than mining. Not because I don't like mining. I do enjoy mining a lot, but we already have mining. Or perhaps a different way of putting the question is, if I already had a Vulture, why would I save up to buy a prospector and be able to do that too? They need to think about what their 20-word or less answer to that question is. But that is not the main problem that they were having, and part of it is that they are apparently forgetting what is the actual need for salvaging in the verse and not simply the gameplay behind it. The Vulture in the verse and the Vulture in real life are performing the very same, very necessary role, and that is eating the dead things so that the world is not buried in dead things. And this is not an irrelevant consideration. Look around some of our more active landing zones, and it can be a real problem finding a place to land and a way to get to the door because of all the ship corpses littering the area. So if one of the primary benefits is decluttering the area, bam, you've just taken 100 steps backwards and maybe even 1,000 steps backwards before you can begin to take one step forward. And that goes for both the personal inconvenience of trying to maneuver around all the clutter and the server burden of having to manage so many extra persistent entities. And that particularly goes for the situation they are considering of having the Vulture be able to break apart an 890 jump, because there is literally no way that the Vulture is ever going to carry away any but a tiny fraction of all of those chunks of debris that you've just created. So the answer to the question about how the Vulture breaks apart an 890 is that it doesn't, ever. For the same reason we don't let a single prospector break apart the largest of asteroids or entire mountains. It's simply a bad idea for any ship in this role to be creating so much more clutter than they can take away, because the fundamental game ecology purpose is to get rid of the clutter. So when they did their stress test and broke the 890 into so many hundreds of pieces, and it took so many minutes of time to do it, my thought was we had just witnessed the murder of the entity graph database, and potentially with it, any chance of the project ever being completed. You see, at the start of the project, it was being built with a persistence called P-cache. And P-cache, we were told by CG, was just not measuring up to their needs, capacity, latency, and scale, and so they were coming up with something called I-cache that would let us do so much more. And I wonder, was it P-cache actually not doing what it was supposed to do, or had the needs increased? And then I-cache was also dropped before actually finishing being completed, because it also did not measure up to the needs for capacity, latency, and scale that we were going to need. But had I-cache not delivered, or had the needs overexpanded? So now, after years of development and turmoil, we have the entity graph database powering persistent entity streaming, clearly failing to meet of capacity, latency, and scale for this prototype. And is it the deficiency of the entity graph, or is it the fault of the needs? But the feature team will shout, but we need to do this. Do you hear me? We need this. Give programmers a shiny new hammer and every problem looks like a nail, or even 1,000 nails. And they will justify it by saying, hey, the cargo refactor guys are turning what used to be one block of cargo into hundreds of individual boxes. Why shouldn't I be able to turn one piece of debris into hundreds of pieces of debris for my purposes? And that is where creative compromises come in. Maybe instead of making quite so many cargo boxes, you, as often as possible, turn 32 of those boxes into one, which is what we are seeing in the next stage of the cargo refactor, the 32 SCU container and more powerful tractor beams so we can move them. Which is what brings me here to Cloudview Center on Orison just to look at a cherry blossom tree. Now, you may not have ever thought about it as you ran by, but these petals are not objects. They do not exist on the server. They have no load on the database whatsoever. They're a particle effect that is calculated and exists only on your graphics card. Now, imagine somebody at CIG deciding that we need to do Cherry Blossoms Tier 2. They want the cherry blossoms to interact more believably with physics as they fall and hit each other, your body, and the ground. They want to be able to grab an individual cherry blossom. They want to be able to pick cherry blossoms of particularly intense use and sell them. They want to be able to carry their inventory of cherry blossoms and trade cherry blossoms with others. They want to be able to put a cherry blossom on a table and come back tomorrow and have the same cherry blossom still be on that table. Cherry Blossom Tier 2 will have so much more realism and vegetative gameplay than Cherry Blossom Tier 1. The only downside is that the Cherry Blossom refactor might very well utterly overwhelm the entity graph database with constantly created entities like, this. So my point is that these should be, figuratively speaking, cherry blossoms. Why didn't they create them that way in the prototype? The answer might be really simple, yet sort of lame. Particle effects are a highly specialized skill. Nobody can have every skill. You can't create a prototype using systems you don't know how to use. That's why sometimes the best prototypes are crudely hand-drawn ones. Why? Because you can draw things that you know can be done, but don't know exactly how to do them yourself. So the way this should work, with absolutely minimal additional server load, is once the chunks are made from the craft using the destruction due to the new Maelstrom system that's being worked on, do not further break down the chunks. The grinder beam creates a shower of sparks and dust, which is an effect we already associate with metal grinding, and that will hide what's going on underneath on the object itself. Depending on game parameters, grinding beams, size, power, waste versus speed, not wanting the whole thing to vaporize into dust, whatever, chunks are pulled out from the cloud of sparks and into the ship. Each chunk adds the mass of the SCU that I have collected and reduces the mass property of the ship chunk. Just properties. As the mass reduction occurs, texture replacement or weathering effects will make the ship scrap piece become more Swiss cheese-like, although it will only see it after the beam is turned off and the spark effect disappears. When the mass drops below a minimum threshold, the remainder disperses as dust. The essential difference for the Reclaimer and potential future middle-sized salvage ship is that the Reclaimer pulls off much larger chunks faster and actually pulls the chunks into the ship using an animation with the claw, but also has a high threshold for making things just dissolve into dust. The Vulture is far slower but has a much lower threshold for dust, allowing for better yield, particularly on small ships. For example, a single-seat fighter like a Gladius or Arrow would be almost immediately dusted by a Reclaimer, but a Vulture could get quite a bit from it before reaching the dust threshold. So that's my suggestion about how to do it differently than the prototype shown in ISC. Is it better? Well, I know a couple of things. First, it doesn't create 1,000 objects of clutter in order to remove one object of clutter. And secondly, it places essentially zero net additional stress on the entity graph database, or even much effort at all on the servers. Is it more fun than whatever they were expecting to be happening with this prototype? I don't know, but sometimes it's better not to make a better cherry blossom. Finally, an unrelated request, the ISC video team. Knock it off with the goofy depictions that won't ever happen in the game. This was just one more exploding toilet. Why do I know that this will never happen in the game? Check out a Reclaimer and try to hover it nose down, clamped towards the ground. Enough said. So what's the harm? Well,
his people are completely literal. Metaphors are gonna go over his head.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it.
Some literal idiot out there isn't going to understand the difference and add it to their video compilation of promises that were never met. You may know the difference. I may know the difference. Even the guy making the clickbait compilation of broken promises knows the difference, but they're going to do it anyway because, hey, it gets clicks. The game has plenty of hilarious situations that happen in the game all on its own. Just ask Voidy Vids. And now for an update on our giveaways. There's a CitizenCon theme Dream video editing contest for the Elgato Stream Deck XL, that invaluable creator peripheral. See the linked video in the description for my details on that. And then the ship giveaways. First, we have our 10,000 subscriber, and now approaching 13 actually, for the LTI Hull C, the colossal cargo container carrying craft, or $100 of Steam Store credit, to be given away when the sea goes live, now scheduled for 3.20. And the big annual IAE week giveaway for your choice of either the Galaxy Complete, the massive modular mining moving medical machine, or the brand new big box bargain bazaar called the Merchantman, or again, $100 of Steam Store credit. Just be a member and be entered automatically, or subscribe and comment using the secret word. And the secret word for this video is the plant at Orison I used as an example. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Danny Raymond for Ray's Guide.